Welcome to Coach Fireside Chat, the podcast where we strip away the glamour and get straight to the heart of coaching. No scripts, no filters, just honest, raw conversations with coaches who are out there making a real impact. I'm Karl Sandland, your host and growth strategist for coaches. I work with coaches to help them build, scale, and create lasting impact in the industry. And in this podcast, I sit down with experienced coaches to deep dive into their journey, their struggles, their breakthroughs, and their unfiltered take on what it really means to be a coach. Whether you're an aspiring coach looking to grow your practice, or you're searching for the right coach to support your personal or professional transformation, this podcast is for you. No fluff, no sales pitches, just real talk about the coaching world from those who are doing the work and changing lives. So grab a seat by the fire and let's get into it. Coming from a solid background as a mental health nurse specialising in alcohol addiction, Leanne's seen the devastating impact of excessive drinking on both the individual and their families. And it was with this background that she's decided to embark on coaching and healing as a journey to set up her own coaching business as the Free Spirit Coach. So alcohol can be enjoyed when taken in moderation. So what Leanne has set out to do is to try and help high achievers who may or may not recognize that alcohol is having a negative impact on their lives. And it's not uncommon for alcohol to creep up and become a habit, because it's not always an obvious concern. So what Leanne wants to do is get the conversation flowing and started and bring alcohol out into the open rather than keeping it behind those closed doors as a secret that can often carry shame and embarrassment. We're going to be discussing how to find a healthier relationship with alcohol. Thank you again for being here with us. It's a really important topic, and it's something that I know not just a lot of people, but certainly a lot of high achievers will struggle with at times, because let's face it, a lot of us will turn to vices to deal with the day-to-day life, the stresses, and those things can become quite damaging. But I believe there's a bit of a backstory, isn't there, as to where this connection lies that you have with alcohol and understanding the negative impact that it can have. Could we start perhaps by just talking a little bit about that background?
Yeah, of course. My mum was a primary school teacher, married. She had myself and my younger brother. And yeah, I think with my mum, it was one of those things where it was a gradual, this is what I'm saying about alcohol can just creep into somebody's life. I moved out of home when I was 24, so I wasn't aware of probably the extent of my mum's drinking. In 2003, my dad was diagnosed with cancer. Obviously a difficult time for my mum going through all that. But I was aware that she was drinking more than she probably should. But again, she would go to work, function, she did everything she needed to do. Mm-hmm. And then it was actually the year after, a week before my dad died, the doctor had been down at the house and had told my mum at that point that I think it was classed as, you have a problem with your liver and you can't drink again. Me and my brother had cleared all the alcohol out the house. But then my dad died, the funeral, my mum's drinking. You're in a really awkward position because we didn't really know much about what the whole liver damage was. So we were just going, oh, she'll probably be fine to have a wee drink. It's her husband's funeral. 10 weeks after my dad died, my mum collapsed, was rushed into hospital and died the following day. So it turned out she had sepsis on the background of her cirrhosis, and overnight all her organs just shut down. I think that really, at the time, it was such a weird time. Obviously losing both parents within 10 weeks was just a really bizarre time. And I remember a lot of us telling people what was wrong with my mum and what she had died of. We didn't mention cirrhosis or alcohol. Over the years, I was like, no, this is what caused it. It was actually her drinking and her damaged liver that actually caused this. I think I started becoming just a bit more open about it because I thought, we need to be honest about this. So years later, when I became trained as a mental health nurse and qualified in 2018, And after a year working as a community psychiatric nurse, the job of alcohol liaison came up at the hospital. And I thought, it really appealed to me. And I think starting in that job made me realise just how little I knew about the damage that alcohol does, and how little I knew about probably what my mum went through on her cirrhosis path.
The physical or the mental side, or both?
I think both. I think there was definitely denial from my mum that looking back now, knowing what I know now, there was definitely a lot of denial that my mum wasn't, I suppose she didn't want to accept that there was a problem with alcohol because it made her feel good. It was there as a stress reliever at the end of a busy day as a primary school teacher. So it was only doing the job that I'm in now that I wished I had all this information back then, because I sometimes think, could I have changed things? Could I have made things better? So I think it really has been a real learning curve for me. I'm 52. So at my age, to then start thinking only a few years ago, I then truly became aware of the damage that alcohol really got me thinking that, my God, why do we not know about this stuff? Why is it not out there?
There's so many things that we know are not good for us, but I guess what we never really know unless we've been through it or specifically educated is just what the actual damage is, what it does inside your body, to your organs, how it starts to shut them down, the physical damage to the brain in some cases. It's actually quite scary. And I guess the people who are probably in the know most at times are the people who are addicted. But the thing is, they're actually ignoring it because of the addiction. And it's this weird loop, isn't it? Then it's probably then a bit of embarrassment or shame. Oh, it's not really a problem. And you hear of alcoholics hiding bottles, don't you? Because they don't want other people to know how much they're drinking. It's quite a scary place. But there is that shame, isn't there? The embarrassment. And I don't know whether this is a psychological or a physical thing, but why do you think it is that despite that embarrassment or shame or hiding, that's not enough for some people to stop?
That's something that it blew my mind when I started working in the hospital and seeing some of the states that people were coming into the hospital in, really unwell, sometimes ending up in ICU, intubated, just in such a state because of either their alcohol withdrawals being out of control, so seizures, delirium tremens, which are hallucinating, really serious withdrawal conditions, or just even an upper GI bleed where they're bleeding out because of the damage done to their liver, causing all this other stuff to go on. So some people are ending up really unwell, and yet they will still go out and drink again. And this, I think, was something that I couldn't quite get my head around. When people are so unwell and have done so much damage and yet continue to drink. And I suppose it's been something that I personally am trying to think, what is it that needs to be said or done in order to get that person to really appreciate damage they're doing and how close to death they were and how lucky they are to be leaving the hospital. And this is a fresh start. We use this as a fresh start. And I think there's probably a combination of lots of things. I think some people are maybe so ingrained that is their life. I see people that they drink dependently, maybe a litre of vodka a day. And so obviously they're doing lots of damage, but then because of that, their level of drinking, everything else around them has fallen apart. So they're no longer working. Their family have kind of given up on them to a certain extent, or they don't have any family around them. Financially, they don't have any money. They're maybe living in homeless accommodation. So life isn't great. And their social circle are people in these homeless accommodations that, again, drink daily. So it's really hard. There's some people that are just stuck in that cycle. And you think, how do you get that person out? You're going to have to remove them from the people that are probably their only friendship group.
People like them. They can relate to those people, can't they?
Yeah, so there's definitely that aspect of people. There's people that they have supportive families and yet they still continue to drink. And again, I think there is obviously a psychological mindset that needs to shift. I always say to people, they want to come in for a detox. In our hospital, people don't solely come in for a detox. If you're coming in physically and end up getting kept in, you'll get a detox in the back of that. But there is a hospital that people can go for a detox. And I always say that's not the magic cure. You're not going to go in there for 9 days and come out and that's it. You're never going to drink again. Physically, you're not going to need the alcohol because you've been detoxed from the alcohol. But psychologically, that's when the work really starts. That's when you have to start making those positive changes and challenging those thoughts that come into your head, those wee thoughts that have said, oh God, you've not had a drink for 9 days, you've done really well, you'll be able just to have one. And I hear that a lot from people. Oh yeah, I hadn't drank for a couple of weeks and I thought, I'll just be able to have the one, and then it's just spiraled again. So I try and get people to be aware of those thoughts. When you get that wee thought coming into your head saying that, challenge it. Don't just be like, I'll go off to the shop and get a bottle of wine. Challenge it and say, actually, what are going to be the consequences if I do that? How am I going to feel about myself if I've done so well and then I spoil it? So I try to get people to just be aware of their thoughts, because obviously thoughts create feelings, which then creates your behaviours and action. And there's a technique called the addictive voice recognition technique. Okay. And it's in a book by a guy called Jack Trimpey, and called Rational Recovery. And he talks about that voice and challenging it. And sometimes people give it a name. So they'll call it the beast brain. They'll call it their wine witch.
So like their inner voice or the demon that's telling them to drink and they need it.
Yeah. And I feel people do have a choice. And I know it's not an easy choice. I'm not diminishing the fact that pool is there. But I always say to people, you have a choice whether when you get that voice in your head and you've maybe done really well, you've been off alcohol, you get that wee voice in your head, on that journey to the shop, you can decide at any point to turn back. So there is a choice that can be made. Your addictive voice doesn't have legs that can walk to the shop, or your addictive voice doesn't have money that can pay for the alcohol. You're doing it. You could choose not to do it. And I think that the range of people we work with, especially in the hospital, you've got the people that are the chronic dependents, that you can't just get somebody to suddenly stop drinking. If people are drinking a lot, they need to do a reduction. They can't just suddenly stop because withdrawal symptoms.
What are the actual physical things that can happen to your body, your organs, if you just literally go cold turkey from alcohol, from being really dependent?
There's a really good example of a patient that I saw a few years ago, and he was in our major trauma ward. In his withdrawals, he started going into the delirium tremens, which is where people hallucinate, they see, they hear things. He looked out his window and he thought people were coming up his staircase to attack him. What he did was he grabbed a knife, he stabbed himself in the abdomen, slit his wrist, and then jumped out his window. So he ended up in the major trauma ward for, I think he was in there a good couple of months, and then he had to go to a kind of rehab facility. And so I saw him a few times within that admission just to speak to him about his alcohol, see what we could do once he's out of hospital and back home again. And the withdrawals can have absolutely devastating effects. People, because they're so much in distress, they're hallucinating, they're hearing things, they're seeing things. So it puts people at huge risk. And sometimes we have to tell people that they have to go home and drink, and that's a weird thing for us to have to say.
But, as in, do it progressively, gently.
So if somebody comes into the emergency department and they're not going to be getting admitted, we have to advise them that, and to prevent them going into withdrawals, they're going to have a drink when they get out of hospital. And it's such a shame, because people, especially if they are chronic dependent on alcohol, then they can't reduce. So they're not going to go home and I'll say, don't go and have a party to yourself. I'm talking about just sipping away. You'll be aware of your own withdrawal symptoms. Just sip away the alcohol until you feel that those have passed. But that's really hard to tell somebody that maybe drinks a litre of vodka a day or 6 bottles of wine a day, to say, go home and just sip a glass of wine. It's not going to happen. So it's horrible having to say that to somebody, but we obviously have to do it for the right reasons.
That just shows the severity of the situation of becoming addicted, isn't it? It's like you can't, it's no longer a choice. You can't just stop. Your body won't allow you to just stop. It's almost like you could do with something that in some way infuses alcohol in a
Yeah.
controlled way for perhaps somebody who's addicted to alcohol. When you release them, at least then they're not in control of choices. Because I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's,
Yeah.
you probably think with the best will in the world that you're giving them a choice of, look, just drink in moderation, just you need to have some, but just make it a little bit. But the reality is they don't have a choice, really, do they? Their mind and body is wired up that actually I just need to be feeling different than this, and I know what was going to make me feel significantly different, and that's it. It's that slippery slope, isn't it?
Definitely. And I think it is a really difficult conversation, and especially if there's family members there and they're saying, what do you mean you're telling them to go home and drink? I'm so sorry, but we're having to do this in order to keep your loved ones safe. But for family, we get family members that want us to lock up their partners or their kids because they're saying you need to lock them up so they won't drink. And again, it's having that tough conversation. We can't do that. We can't just lock somebody up so they won't drink. There's community services there and trying to support them as best we can with that. But I feel for family members, it's a really tricky situation. I see patients in the hospital that come in and they started drinking because they had the death of a parent or the death of a family member, and the wheels have fallen off, and that's it. They've just taken to alcohol. You go home after a busy day at work and you've just had such a stressful day. You have that glass of wine and all of a sudden you feel, oh, that feels really nice. I can just relax. And I think this is where the creeping in starts to come in, where it was interesting today. I'd mentioned to Carol just before we came on about, I saw a 28-year-old girl today in the hospital. Mm-hmm. So she'd been referred in by her GP, and I went to see her, and the poor thing, she talked about feeling shameful and embarrassed. And I was the first person out with her mum and her sister that she was speaking to about alcohol because she was so ashamed by it. And her drinking started, so she was in a 10-year marriage that was really damaging and abusive. When that marriage ended, when she left that marriage last year, she said her drinking started to slowly increase. So again, it was that a glass of wine, next game night, a couple of glasses of wine, and up until 4 months ago, it then peaked and she was drinking like a bottle of wine every day. And so she's, I need help. I just feel I've got this compulsion to drink now. And obviously she's been through a lot with her marriage, and the alcohol was a thing. She ended up coming back up to Scotland. She'd been down in London, came back up to Scotland, moved back in with her parents. So coming back up here to not the same job, and just felt really lonely. And she said, I drink because I can't be in my own company because the thoughts of the past start to dominate. I spent quite a bit of time with her today. I did the addictive voice thing with her. And, but I thought at 28, I'm saying to her, please, you have to get a handle on this now. I don't want you to become one of those people where the damage is done and you've got no choice. The choice is taken out of your hands as to whether that damage is going to happen. So I think when you get somebody young coming in as well, I think that's where I really feel I try so hard to get them to make those choices now before it gets to the point further down the line where the damage has gone too far. And I think this was one of the reasons that for my coaching niche, helping high achievers, because in my job, we are part of the liver transplant assessment process. So we've got the liver transplant assessment, and the whole of Scotland comes to the one in our hospital. And I would see a lot of people that had maybe been drinking daily for 40 years and had no real impact. Alcohol had just integrated itself into their lives. And whether it was through events at work, sometimes I would see people that part of their job, they do a lot of socialising and meeting clients in bars and restaurants and having drinks. And so it just becomes part of the job. And then it comes to the point where their liver is just given up. And then they find out that they've got cirrhosis and they're in for a liver transplant assessment. And I saw a couple of months ago, it was an ex-CID officer. And again, he had drank for 40 years, every night after work, 6 pints of lager. And then at the weekend, he'd have 10 over the Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And I said to him, did you ever think that you were drinking too much? And he said, no. He said, because I'd be driving about in my car and I'd see the people on the streets drinking spirits. And so I thought, oh, that's fine. I'm nowhere like them. And I thought, it's really interesting. And I think this is the thing with my job as well. You go to speak to somebody and they'll say, I'm not an alcoholic. And I'll say, it's not a word I ever use. And they'll say, because I don't, I'll say, what does that mean to you? And they'll say, I don't drink spirits, or I don't drink in the morning, or I've got a job. And it's interesting people's interpretation of what a healthy relationship with alcohol is. And so the people that come in for the transplant assessment, I always ask the question, did you ever think you were drinking too much? And they always say either no or yes, I did, but I didn't do anything about it.
They're both actually quite startling, aren't they? And I think you're right when you say about the fact that there is a bit of naivety there, but you hear about functioning alcoholics. I would assume that it means you go about your everyday life and people probably wouldn't really know. You're just someone who's a bit of fun and after work probably has a drink and then turns up to work the following day again. But it's about, like you said, it's the relationship that you have with it, isn't it? It's the, I'm going to choose to drink versus the drink has chosen me and I've got to consume it.
When COVID hit and lockdown started, our client group just didn't come anywhere near the hospital. The hospitals all just went really quiet because people were scared. So it was really interesting because then once things started to open up again, we were hit by a lot of people that had become really unwell. And a lot of it was people that had probably been teetering on the edge of alcohol becoming a problem, but their job had contained it. So whether they drove to work and then they were in their office all day surrounded by colleagues, and then by the time they got home at night, then they'd maybe have their first drink. But you remove that, they're now working from home. They don't have to drive anywhere. They're sitting, they don't have somebody potentially going to smell alcohol from them. They don't have to drive home at the end of the day. They could basically switch off their laptop and have a drink straight away.
With the working at home, the remote working, it does remove some of the natural barriers that would have normally stopped the choice. And again, I think it goes back to that whole choice, doesn't it? You remove those barriers, remove those things that are stopping you functioning in a way that's expected, and all of a sudden it's what's to stop you?
We definitely saw a spike in those people that we reckon this was their first presentation to hospital, because obviously their alcohol had been kept to a certain level, and then all of a sudden COVID hit and they're drinking more, and then they've come in with withdrawals, because a lot of the time people's withdrawals will kick in when they become physically unwell and they start vomiting, so they're not able to keep the alcohol down, and they'll go into withdrawals. So we had a lot of people that were, having seizures for the first time because they weren't aware that that could happen. There was definitely a spike in our caseload.
What is a healthy relationship with alcohol?
I suppose it's looking at how much somebody's drinking and saying, okay, and a lot of the time it's not as if we're saying to people, you need to abstain. There's some people who do say that if they do have cirrhosis and you think, right, you actually can't drink again. But there's people that you think, okay, especially if they're not dependent. So if it's somebody that's just drinking too much, you say, maybe you could reduce what you're drinking. If somebody's dependent, I think you're not going to get a reduction from them. You're not going to get them going from drinking 3 bottles of wine a night down to 1 bottle a night. They're not going to be able to sustain that. So people that are dependent, we try and get them to think about the abstinence route, which isn't easy. I think for people it's quite an overwhelming thing. Again, I think it's asking people what they think would work for them, because at the end of the day, I want the decision to come from them. I want them to make that choice rather than me saying, I think this is what you should drink. So it's looking at getting that balance and looking at, I always ask people, what are the positives and the negatives to your drinking? And a lot of the time they'll say the positives, actually there's no positives, but the negatives are, I'm always having arguments with my family. Financially, it's costing me a lot of money. My health-wise, in the liver ward in the hospital, so obviously that's a problem. And they can reel off all the negatives. And so it's having that realisation, because they've probably never done that before. They've probably never thought about, okay, what am I gaining from this? And compared to what I'm losing. And I always ask, the other question I ask is, what's important to you? What do you value in your life? And again, it's getting them to think about, I value my family. I value my job, I love my job, I value my friends. And they say, okay, is alcohol damaging any of those things? Has it had an impact on your work? Have you turned up for work one day not firing on all cylinders because you had been drinking too much the night before? Have you made bad decisions because of your drinking? It's trying to get them to be aware, more aware, and think about their relationship with alcohol and what changes they could make. And I suppose that's what's difficult in the hospital setting, because sometimes we're just seeing people for that one-off. They come in, we go and see them on the ward while they're in, we give them that advice, we give them the education, and then they leave. I think with the coaching, what really appealed to me is I can do lots of different things with somebody that I probably wouldn't be able to do in my job.
Near the start of that journey, as opposed to when they've been admitted, they've got the liver, or they've got other health conditions. Because again, it's about that understanding what a healthy relationship is, understanding what's healthy for you. Because I'm guessing a lot of people that you deal with, certainly within the hospital, are dependent at that point. The power is in educating people about what are the symptoms. The NHS does a great job. For example, COVID. Let's go back to COVID. If you've got this symptom, go and get a bloody test, because you might have COVID. You might not, but actually you might have COVID. Go and be sure. It's almost like people could value from almost having a bit of a checklist, couldn't they? If you are putting this ahead of this, or you've got, I don't know, debt issues, but you're drinking as well, it's if you actually valued the alcohol perhaps above things that happen in life. And I don't know, they were just silly examples. I guess as a coach, it's about not always proactively, but certainly trying to help people at the start of a journey that could go down the wrong path.
I think that's what I'm really passionate about, is trying to get it as an open conversation, so people aren't feeling shame. The girl, the 28-year-old that I saw today, that was really, she said, I just feel so much shame. I say, don't feel shame. You're here now. You've said out loud now that you've got a problem with alcohol. Now we can fix it. Now we can get you on that path. I said, you need to be kind to yourself, because if you're not kind to yourself, then the alcohol is going to then just creep in even further. You need to build up that resilience and that strength. So I think it's about, I try and empower people as well to realise you're the one that holds the secret to this. You're the one that holds the key to your sobriety or your reduction. There's nobody else that can do it but you. And I will say that must be a nice feeling, because you're not having to then wait on a waiting list to be seen by somebody. From today, you could decide, I am going to be on this path. I'm going to make the choice to phone that contact tomorrow, make that appointment, go and see them, attend the weekly meetings with them, do whatever work they suggest that I do to help me get on that path. I say, so it's trying to empower that person to realise you can actually take control and not allow the alcohol to just keep knocking you down, because alcohol is never going to give you anything. It's always going to slowly just strip you of everything, whether it's your health, your finances, your relationships, your jobs, your home. It never gives. It always takes. And I always say, if you had a friend that did that, you would tell them to do one.
And to be honest, that's such a powerful statement. It always takes. And I've never really framed it in that way, but you're absolutely, it does take, and it's unforgiving. It doesn't give a shit who you are. It will just keep taking and taking. And I guess that's important, because if that was a different type of disease, if it was an illness like COVID, for example, people were hyper aware of, I don't want to get COVID, because the ramifications of that is I could die, or I could pass it on to someone else. When you associate the seriousness of something with an outcome, I guess it becomes more real. But when it's so socially acceptable, and it's in Coronation Street, which is all built around a pub, and it's in EastEnders, and that's all built around a pub, it's, what do we expect?
It was really interesting, because last week, I was off work last week, and Loose Women came on, and there was an interior designer on it called Kelly Hoppin, and she was talking about going through breast cancer, and then came through it, and surgery was successful. And one of the presenters said to her, did you go out and celebrate? She went, oh no, I don't drink. And the presenter said, but you can celebrate without alcohol. And I was like, good on you. Again, it just shows that association with celebration and equals alcohol. If you're invited along to a wedding or a party and there was no alcohol there, people would probably kick up a bit of a stink.
I think I mentioned when we first started chatting a few weeks ago, I mean, I don't drink now at all. Again, it's not a It's not that I'm fearful of it. It just doesn't really have a place in my life. I can remember many a time, because my wife doesn't drive, I'm the designated driver, and I would be like disgruntled at the fact we were going to somebody's wedding or a party, and I'm not even really looking forward to this. It's not like I can drink, is it? I'm the designated driver, and you almost think that I can't have a good time.
There's days in my job like, oh my God, I could just do with a drink when I get home. And it's funny how that just automatically comes out your mouth. But by the time I've come home, I've put on Emmerdale, I've had a chocolate biscuit and a cup of tea. But it's interesting, that's people's language. Oh God, I just can't wait to get home and get a drink. What a tough day it's been. And it just becomes something that is the norm. And I'll say it, but I have no intention of coming home and having a drink, because I do drink, but I'm not, I can go for weeks and months and it doesn't even bother me. And most of the time, if I'm meeting up with friends, I'll take the car, because I'd rather just I don't want to pay for an Uber, so I'd rather just take the car. But it's interesting how there's just that, oh, it's wine o'clock. That language, again, is fun and frivolous, and yeah, that's quite a nice thing to do. But yeah, it's interesting just how it becomes that normal way of being, isn't it?
And it's no wonder, isn't it, that it actually grabs hold of so many people, because
Yeah.
you're probably, I've been this as I was a teen and in my 20s, you go out to get drunk. And it's, at what point is it not fun anymore?
Yeah.
Fortunately, I used to work on the doors for a number of years, so I saw a lot of the other side of it as well, and saw people getting drunk all the time thinking, my God, what are you doing? And so I became quite sensitive to that quite early on. But yeah, it's the norm. And so how can we stop that then? Is that something that the health secretary should be picking up? Is that something that should be instilled into the NHS? A secondary education thing? What do you think is the answer?
The government needs to step up. I think they gain a lot of money from alcohol, so they're not going to demonise it. When you see adverts on the telly, especially around Christmas time, and there's alcohol seen as being glamorous. It's never, you never see adverts, Bob and Jim absolutely pissed on an Edinburgh street. You never see that. They're not going to put an advert like that, try to glamorise Tennant's Lager. Whereas you see all these lovely artisan gins and beers, and that it's all glamorous people, it's all lovely settings and sunsets and oceans, and to try and draw people in. They're not showing the reality of somebody spewing down a toilet.
The government have got there somewhat with smoking, haven't they? They are now behind shutters in most places. They're not allowed to actively advertise on TV. I remember growing up and there was the cigar adverts, and they were always actually quite fun to watch. And yet you don't see that now, and they have to be plain packets and they're heavily taxed. I know smoking is probably a quicker kill, a quicker thing, it's carcinogenic. However, the impact on the blast radius of the family, the friends, a community of somebody dying over a long time from alcohol abuse. One train of thought is actually it's probably worse. So why aren't they taking the same serious note that they have with things like tobacco?
I know, they talk a lot as well about drug deaths. And you think, what about alcohol deaths? That's never mentioned. It's never mentioned how many people have died because of alcohol-related conditions. In the hospital, there's been quite a few deaths recently in the liver ward alone. And it's really sad because it's not old people. It's quite young people that you think, oh God, that just shouldn't have happened. So it's really sad. I just wish the government would do more. I wish they would license it more. You go to the supermarket and there's just rows and rows of beautiful bottles and lovely colours, and they're not trying to make it seem like some poison. They're tempting you. They want you to drink it. They want you to buy it. And so I think definitely the government needs to be the people that actually makes those changes, because I think us on the ground, we try our best with every single patient we see. We really try. I'm going to be doing my very best to help as many people as I can. But we're just very, very small cogs in this huge, big machine. And it needs to come from above, because there's only so much we can do on the ground and so much like community services can do, but we need the funding, we need more resources, we definitely need a lot more, and we need more rehab facilities. There's lots more that can be done, and it just frustrates me that it's not getting done.
And again, it's that proactive approach, isn't it? It's you, yourself, your colleagues are handling the outcome. What we need to be doing is having preventative measures, the educational measures up front, so it doesn't get to the stage where they have to see you or one of your colleagues because they've got it under control. So thinking specifically about you as the free spirit coach, then who should come and speak to you? At what stage in a relationship with alcohol should they be coming to speak to you?
I wouldn't be working with people that are dependent drinkers because there's definitely medical risk with that. So I couldn't take on people that are dependent and drink from the morning they wake up. It's too risky. And obviously, I deal with that in my day job. I suppose I'm looking for people that I'll start to think about their own relationship with alcohol and not comparing themselves to other people. Again, we get people coming in saying, yeah, but I didn't drink as much as my pals when we go out the weekend. It's like, yeah, but you're the one that's in the liver ward. Your pals aren't. We're focusing on you right now because people obviously have different tolerances as well, depending on your size and maybe what you eat and if you do exercise. And there's so many different factors. So it's about getting people to really think. And if they feel, actually, I'm drinking a bit much and it's become a habit and I want to do something about it, then come see me. And whether it is just to reduce what you're currently on, but then also to people, when you start to reduce and see the benefits you get from reducing, you have more money in your pocket. God, you can think a lot clearer. You wake up on the Sunday morning and you feel amazing. When you start to see the benefits of reducing or not drinking, why would you not want to have that in your life? But I'll also work with people that decide that they don't want to drink at all and work towards sobriety. People that just feel, actually, now that I come to think about it, maybe I'm drinking a bit much or I'm drinking every day.
Reading between the lines, it feels very much like what you're saying is people who are still in control of the choice of whether they do and perhaps just don't have that full awareness of the value they associate with drinking or not drinking. It's that awareness, isn't it, of, yeah, but why do I need it? It's an interesting one. Like with every sort of relationship anyone has with anyone or anything, it's all unique to that person as well, isn't it? And it has to be a choice. It has to be what they want. There's no point trying to force someone to stop drinking if they want to drink.
I think it's creating that rapport with somebody, because again, sometimes people are embarrassed. And so when I go to see somebody, I'm always like, oh, here's the fun sponge coming, and trying to just create that rapport. And I want people to feel comfortable when they're having those conversations, because they can be tricky conversations. So it's trying to make those connections right away with somebody and treating them with dignity and respect. This isn't an easy situation.
You're inviting to work with people who perhaps want to understand more and know more and have that healthier relationship. Maybe something feels slightly off. Maybe they're not happy with the amount they're spending on it, or the fact that they associate, I can't be happy unless I'm drinking. I guess it's knowing those traits, knowing those things. And it's interesting. And again, going back to the high achievement side of things, I see it time and time again. It becomes the social norm to do these things. I've worked with senior leaders, and it's, my God, there's certain coping mechanisms, and at some point, I guess an individual has to question with themselves or have help through a coach to question the why to what you're doing.
And I think that's it. I think with the coaching, people are ready to make those changes, whereas people coming into the hospital, they're maybe not even at that stage. They're maybe at that pre-contemplative stage where we're suggesting to them that this could be something they could do. But to them, they've not even considered that. They're just not at that point where they're ready to start making those changes. They've come in, they're really unwell. That's the last thing that's on their mind. So the coaching is working with people that actually do want to make those changes and will put in the work. And I'm going to be doing havening. So havening is a psychosensory modality. So I suppose this is a healing part of the business. And it's an amazing modality that displaces traumatic memories and emotions. And so it can also be used for cravings. So if somebody signs up to my program, they'll get a free havening session with me. So whether it's a traumatic memory that they want to displace and remove, then if that's been something that's maybe caused their drinking, then we can work on that as well. But the havening is also going to be a separate thing that I can do for nothing to do with alcohol. But if somebody does have traumatic memories, emotions or phobias or cravings, we can work on those to displace those memories so that they're gone forever.
Super powerful when combined with the coaching through the relationship with alcohol too, because as we've discussed, a lot of the times it will probably be something that's triggered or led to somebody having an unhealthy relationship, right?
Exactly.
So if somebody wanted to work with you, how would they best get in touch with you? Website, email, social media?
So it's very simple. I am on Facebook. I'm just Leanne Murphy on Facebook. I'm on Instagram as well.
I think it's been a really powerful conversation, and I think from a coaching perspective, I'm in awe in the position that you are in as a coach, because you've got the medical background and seeing the outcomes. You've got the first-hand experience and the family ties to seeing the negative side of things. And now you're looking at that preventative side as well and trying to stop it getting to some of the outcomes that you have to deal with in your day job, which I think is just, it's almost like you've got that full spectrum of knowledge. And if anybody's going to be good at educating people on the negative side of things, it's someone like yourself who's got that experience. So I think what you're doing is incredible. So yeah, it's been fantastic. Really enjoyed having you on, Leanne.
It's just so lovely to be able to offer this service, and I just really want to help as many people as I can. I see the damage every day, what it does, and I want to try and prevent that if I can. So I'm one person, but I can help some people.
Please do reach out if you feel that either yourself or somebody close to you or somebody that you know has some form of non-healthy relationship with alcohol and you'd like any advice, and we can get you in touch with Leanne.
That's it for this episode of Coach Fireside Chat. If you found value in today's episode, please be sure to follow or subscribe so you never miss an insight-packed conversation. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, drop a comment and subscribe for more real talk on coaching. And don't stop there. Check out other fantastic episodes where I sit down with more incredible coaches who are out there making a real impact. Thanks for tuning in.